now.
Okay.
Are we going now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee, I'm going to answer your question from Facebook at the very end. Today we're going to be reading the three Tripitaka Masters Pray for Rain. It's on page 598 of volume 1 of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. The background will start on page, 603. But the key is that, a Tripitaka master, as you hear it in the Goshos, you hear it in the lexicon of Buddhism, but what does it really mean? What is it really? It's kind of Old Testament stuff. So let me go to the dictionary again and read you Tripitaka, Tripitaka master, and Tripitaka teaching. Okay? So the Tripitaka are the three divisions of the Buddhist canon. Okay, the sutras, the Buddha's doctrinal teachings, Vinaya, rules of monastic discipline, and the Abhidharma, commentaries on the sutras, and Vinaya. These are the three divisions of the canon. Okay, so you understand, right? It's like the Buddha's teachings, people other than the Buddha's comments on those teachings, and the rules of monastic discipline. Now, do we follow the rules of monastic discipline in the latter day of the law? No, we have the Buddhism of sowing. We have the precept of the diamond chalice. So we don't do this monastic stuff. Okay, so that's Tripitaka. A Tripitaka master then would be an honorific title given to those who were well versed in the three divisions of the Buddhist canon, the sutras, the Vinaya, rules of the monastic discipline, and the Abhidharma commentaries on the sutras and Vinaya. The honorific title Tripitaka Master was also used in reference to eminent translators of Buddhist scriptures such as Kumarajiva. Kumarajiva was a Tripitaka Master. Okay? All right, so that's that. So now the Daishonin is going to talk about three examples of people that were supposedly all that in a bag of chips, prayed for rain, got some rain, but it was bad rain. And so what this is going to really talk about again, and why I want to discuss it before we start going into the background, these last few Goshos, President Ikeda, by virtue of what he puts into what volume, and he's kind of steering us to perceive and understand the reality that the proof of actual fact goes in both directions. Most of the time, we consider actual proof the answering of our prayer. Okay? The Daishonin's very clear that actual proof is also the shit opposite happening of your prayer. That shows you the actual proof that you're incorrect in the way that you're praying and the efficacy of your prayer. Okay, so this isn't really to us so much as bodhisattvas of the earth. Okay, this is talking about whether or not true word teachings can create the power of prayer that we're able to create with the power of our correct prayer. Okay, so let me go to the background on page 603. It says, this letter was written at Minobu in the first year of Kenji and sent to the lay priest Nishiyama, who lived in Nishiyama village in Fuji district of the Suruga province. Nishiyama appears to have been the steward of that village and a sincere believer who often visited the Daishonin at Minobu bringing offerings and provisions. In the opening of this letter, Nichiren Daishonin explains the importance of good friends who assist or encourage one in one's Buddhist practice, stating that good friends are rare and evil companions, those who hinder one's quest for enlightenment, are too numerous to count. He goes on to point out the distortions of the true word school to which Nishiyama had previously belonged. He then declares that while documentary and doctrinal evidence is important in considering the efficacy of a Buddhist teaching, far more important is the proof of actual fact. Are the prayers answered or are they not answered? Either way, okay? The proof of actual fact, that is the power of a religion to positively affect the human condition. The three Tripitaka masters in this letter's title are Shanwue, Chinkangchi, and Pukun. And as many Goshos as we've read, you've heard all those names before, right? Those are Indian dudes. Three Indian monks who introduced the esoteric teachings to China in the 8th century that later in Japan became known as the True Word School. And so what are the esoteric teachings? What's esoteric again? Secret. Secret. I know something you don't know, and I'm special because of it. Okay. And that's true word, all right? The Daishonin relates instances in which each of these three men prayed for rain at the request of the throne, in each case appearing to have produced destructive gales instead. Okay, rain, but not the kind of rain they were really wanting. He then cites instances in which prayers based on the Lotus Sutra, such as those offered by Tentai in China and Dengyo in Japan, brought down gentle, life-giving rain. Publicly sponsored prayer rituals to bring about rain were not uncommon in ancient China and Japan, where rice crops depended on abundant precipitation and a drought could mean widespread famine. After citing instances in both China and Japan in which true word rituals were known to have brought disaster, the Daishonin further criticized the errors and deceptions of Kobo, the founder of Japan's True Word School, and warns against relying on the prayers of this school for the nation's safety. Japan at this time was facing an impending attack by the Mongol forces. After one attempted invasion that had been foiled by adverse weather, the Mongol emperor had again sent envoys demanding Japan's allegiance. Anxiety gripped the nation as the people prepared to defend themselves against overwhelming odds. The Daishonin himself, in his admonitory treatise on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, had predicted the specter of foreign invasion. Quoting various sutras, he declares that Japan finds itself in this predicament because of the people's attachment to mistaken forms of Buddhism and their rejection and slander of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so going back to page 598, going and getting into the Gosho here. All right, it starts out on 598. 3 Tripitaka masters pray for rain. When a tree has been transplanted, though fierce winds may blow, it will not topple if it has a firm stake to hold it up. But even a tree that is grown up in place may fall over if its roots are weak. Even a feeble person will not stumble if those who are supporting him are strong, but a person of considerable strength when alone may fall down on an uneven path. Everybody's catching the drift? Moreover, had the Buddha not appeared in the world, then, with the exception of the Venerable Shariputra and the Venerable Mahekashayapa, every single person in all the major world system would have sunk into the three evil paths. But through the strong bonds formed by relying upon the Buddha, large numbers of people have attained Buddhahood. Even wicked people such as King Ajatashatru or Angulimala, who one would never expect could reach enlightenment, but would invariably fall into the Avicii hell, by encountering a great person, the Buddha Shakyamuni, were able to attain Buddhahood. Therefore, he says, the best way to attain Buddhahood is to encounter a good friend. It's called a mentor. How far can our own wisdom take us, the Daishonin says. He's basically saying, yeah, you need somebody to put the oil on the wheels or put some water under the boat so you're not dragging it. You know, you get there a lot faster, it'll be meaningful for you. All right. Therefore, the best way to attain Buddhahood is to encounter a good friend. How far can our own wisdom take us? If we have even enough wisdom to distinguish hot from cold, we should seek out a good friend. So what's he saying there? If we do nothing else, if we have no other wisdom capable of putting us in the right direction, the one thing that should stick is that we need somebody to help us understand this. It's too deep to understand without some sort of an explanation to open the door for you to discover the real meaning in your life. All right? Rather than just tripping out and thinking you can read the surface words, that doesn't work. Even if we have enough wisdom to distinguish hot from cold, we should seek out a good friend. But encountering a good friend is the hardest thing to do. For this reason, the Buddha likened it to the rarity of a one-eyed turtle finding a floating log with a hollow in it, the right size to hold in, or the difficulty of trying to lower a thread from the Brahma heaven and pass it through the eye of a needle on earth. Moreover, in this evil latter age, evil companions are more numerous than the dust particles that comprise the land, while good friends are fewer than the specks of dirt one can pile on a fingernail. So what did that just make clear? It's rare to find a good friend. Why are you able to find one if you're able to find one then? Because there are so many that they just like, oh, there's a good friend. No, he just said they're rare as hell. They're so rare that it's like a floating log with a hollow in it, perfect size for a turtle to fit into. Okay, so what's the point? Karma. There must be a karmic connection for that to occur. Okay? It doesn't happen because the numbers are right for it to be a very common process. And so why does such a thing occur? Why do you find a good friend? Because he walks up to you and says, oh, I'm a good friend. Hi. No, because you have the seeking spirit to want to find a mentor and to attach yourself when you find someone of wisdom to try and, until they, show you otherwise, you should try to get as much out of them as you possibly can. Never disparaging them, never going overboard and treating them like a god, but treating them and understanding them to be what they are. A good friend. Someone leading you toward, not someone teaching you and controlling you. That's not what this good friend is about. This is about the good friend that helps you discover what they discovered. Okay? In the same manner that they discovered it. Okay? All right. So he says, again, while good friends are fewer than the specks of dirt one can pile on a fingernail. Why? Because they're that same few specks are the number of bodhisattvas of the earth that appear that can withstand and maintain their faith to the last moment of their life. There's one for one almost, basically, right? He says, continuing on the bottom of page 598, Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world sounds of Mount Potolaka, acted as a good friend to the boy Good Treasures. But though the Bodhisattva taught him the two doctrines of the specific and perfect teachings, he did not reveal to him the pure and perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Bodhisattva, ever wailing, sold himself to as an offering in his quest for a good teacher, whereupon he encountered Bodhisattva Dharmagata. But from the latter, he learned only the three doctrines of the connecting specific and perfect teachings and did not receive instruction in the Lotus Sutra. Shariputra acted as a good friend to a blacksmith and gave him instruction for a period of 90 days, but succeeded only in making him into an ikchantaka, or a person of incorrigible disbelief. Purna discoursed on the Buddhist doctrine for the space of an entire summer, but he taught Hinayana doctrines to persons who had the capacity for Mahayana doctrines, and thereby turned them into Hinayana adherents, which would be for them, he made them go backwards. Thus, even great sages, such as perceiver of the world sounds and Dharmagata, were not permitted to preach the Lotus Sutra. And even arhats who had obtained the fruit of emancipation, such as Shariputra and Purna, were not always able to gauge people's capacity correctly. From these examples, you may imagine how inadequate are the scholars of this latter evil age. It is far better to be an evil person who learns nothing of Buddhism at all than to put one's faith in such men. Do you understand why? Huh? It is far better to be an evil person who learns nothing of Buddhism at all. Now, so what's he qualifying there in just that sentence? You're an evil person, but you don't know anything about Buddhism. So you're not a person of incorrigible disbelief because you haven't had an opportunity to be, because you don't know anything about Buddhism. Okay? And then what happens if you put you put your faith in such men? Lesser teachers. They will teach you a lesser teaching, not the ultimate teaching. Do you understand? That's what he's trying to discern. That's what he's trying to create the discernment over. Okay? I am the correct teacher for the latter day of the law. All right? So he says, from these examples, you may imagine how inadequate are the scholars of this latter evil age. So he's talking about what's this latter evil age? The fifth 500-year period and beyond, right? Okay, so where everything has become confused. Remember, that's the definition. It's everything has become distorted and whacked out, and the power of the correct teaching has been lost because there's nobody actually teaching the correct teaching correctly. Okay, he said, it is far better to be an evil person who learns nothing of Buddhism at all than to put one's faith in such men, because by being an evil person, that's bad enough. But if you don't know anything about Buddhism, you can't slander Buddhism. Okay, that's the point. If you've been taught incorrectly by somebody who's not a correct teacher, okay, you will, by believing them, slander Buddhism without knowing that that's really what you're doing, and you will be led into the evil paths. Okay, that's what he's trying to warn. What's his name? Nishiyama. That's what he's trying to explain to Nishiyama. Okay. Where am I? Am I over here? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Who declare, in such men who declare that heaven is earth, east is west, or fire is water, or assert that the stars are brighter than the moon, or an anthill higher than Mount Sumeru. We could go into every one of those guys, and they all said some bullshit that was so weird that the Daishonin goes, you'd have to be stupid to listen to them. He says, continue on 599, like the sun came out at night, a cup of shit like that. In judging the relative merit of Buddhist doctrines, this is a declarative by Nichiren himself in this letter to Nishiyama, qualifying what his opinion is as Nichiren. Okay, in judging the relative merit of Buddhist doctrines, I, Nichiren, believe that the best standards are those of reason and documentary proof. Okay, in other words, it can't be ridiculous. It's got to make sense. And then there's got to be some predication that backs it up as a premise in the first place that precedes this verbalization, right? Okay, he says, and even more valuable, he's just qualified documentary and the standards of reason are very important. He's saying even more valuable than those, though, than reason and documentary proof is the proof of actual fact. So again, let me read it. In judging the relative merit of Buddhist doctrines, I, Nichiren, believe that the best standards are those of reason and documentary proof. And even more valuable than reason and documentary proof is the proof of actual fact. In the past, continue on 599, around the 5th year of the Brunei era, 1268, when the Ezo barbarians rebelled in the east and the Mongol envoys arrived from the west with their demands, I surmised that these events had come about because the people did not put faith in the correct Buddhist doctrines. Okay, that's why I wrote the Risho on Kokoran. That's why I wrote, okay, I guessed that. He's being very honest. This is how my enlightenment manifested, okay? I guessed that prayer rituals would surely be performed to subdue the enemy, and that such rituals would be conducted by the priests of the True Word School. Of the 3 countries of India, China, and Japan, I will leave aside India for the moment, but I am certain that Japan, like China, will be undone by the True Word School. The Tripitaka master Shamu Wei journeyed to China from India in the reign of Emperor Xuanzun of the Tang dynasty. At that time, there was a great drought, and Shamu Wei was ordered to conduct conduct prayers for rain. He succeeded in causing a heavy rain to fall, and as a result, everyone from the emperor on down to the common people was overcome with joy. Shortly thereafter, however, a great wind began to blow, wreaking havoc throughout the land, and the people's enthusiasm quickly palled. During the same reign, the Tripitaka master Chi came to China from India. He too prayed for rain, and within the space of 7 days, a heavy rain fell, and people rejoiced as they had earlier. But when a great wind of unprecedented violence arose, the ruler concluded that the true word school was an evil and fearsome doctrine, and came near to sending Chi back to India. The latter, however, made various excuses and contrived to remain. Again, in the same reign, the Tripitaka master Pukun prayed for rain. Within 3 days, a heavy rain fell, producing the same kind of joy as before. But once more, a great wind arose, this time even fiercer than on the 2 previous occasions, and raged for several weeks before subsiding. So the Daishonin says, how strange were those occurrences. There is not a single person in Japan, whether wise or ignorant, who knows about them. Now, does everybody remember? We've just read a Gosho within the last 2 or 3 that we've read, where he's saying, these prayers being conducted by true word are for sure going to bring ruin to the country. He says to Heino Seimin, if they use true word priests to do the prayers, they'll invade within 6 months, which they did. Okay? So now he's qualifying to Nishiyama. How strange were these occurrences? Because one would think that a Tripitaka master praying, why would the rain turn turbulent and destructive? He says, how strange were these occurrences? There's not a single person in Japan, whether wise or ignorant, who knows about them. If there is anyone who wishes to find out that person, had better question me in detail and learn about these matters while I am still alive. Now, I don't know why he put that paragraph in, but I'm sure it's because he had studied so many obscure writings that most people would not have known about this fallout about true word and the prayers for rain. He says, turning to the case of Japan, in the 2nd month of the 1st year of the Tensho era, 824, there was a great drought. The great teacher Kobo was requested to pray for rain in Shinsen-in garden. But a priest named Subin came forward and protesting that he had been a member of the priesthood longer and ranked higher than Kobo, asked that he be allowed to conduct the ritual. Subin was granted permission and carried out the prayers. On the 7th day, a heavy rain fell, but it fell only on the capital and not in the surrounding countryside. Kobo was then instructed to take over the task of praying, but 7 days went by without any rain falling, then another 7 days, and still another 7 days. Finally, the emperor himself prayed for rain and caused it to fall. But the priests of the Toji Kobo's temple, the priests of Toji Kobo's temple referred to it as our teacher's reign. One need only consult the records to learn the details. So again, I emphasize, the Daishonin just doesn't pull this stuff out of his head. He actually has gone and looked into all of this stuff because he's been obsessed with finding out why the country's not being protected. Okay? Why the Buddhist doctrines and teachings that have upheld the prosperity of the country, upheld everything. Okay? So, one need only consult the records to learn the details. He's saying, I did it. Now, I'm not going to drag him out. You want to go do it, then go do it. It's there. Okay, it's just like me talking to Mr. Lee about all those Goshos in Volume 2. I don't need to talk about True Word and all that. This was one of the greatest frauds ever known to our nation, the fact that Kobo claimed the rain that actually the emperor had prayed and gotten to fall. This was one of the greatest frauds ever known in our nation. And in addition, there were matters of the epidemic that broke out in the spring of the 9th year of the Konin era, 818, and of the 3-pronged diamond pounder, which were also frauds of a most particular kind. These things had best be shared in person. And so, again, he's talking about, I got to go to this. Kobo was really out there. This refers to Kobo's claim number 3, made in his secret key to the heart sutra, which the Daishonin cites later, that while he was praying to end an epidemic, the sun came out at night. All right, and then and then 4, a ritual implement used in esoteric Buddhism. He's talking about that, though, the 3-pronged diamond powder. An esoteric, again, it's a secret thing that you use. It's for secret ceremonies. He was in China, threw it across toward Japan, and then found it. He one day went out and said, "Look," he claimed that he had thrown it all the way from. Okay, let me just read this. It's ridiculous, but he was a scam artist. A ritual implement used in esoteric Buddhism, symbolizing the adamantine resolve to attain enlightenment, which can destroy any illusion. The biography of the great teacher Kobo states, on the day when he set out by ship from China, he faced in the direction of Japan and threw the diamond pounder up into the air. It sailed far away and disappeared among the clouds. Goddamn better, but he must have been a strong dude. Let's face it. He journeyed to the foot of Mount Koya. Now, again, he just threw it in the direction of Japan from China. And yet, he knew to go where it landed in Japan. He journeyed to the foot of Mount Koya and determined to establish his place of meditation there. And later, it was discovered that the 3-pronged diamond powder that he had thrown out over the sea was there on the mountain. Oh. Imagine that. Wow, that Kobo guy, he's really something, huh? Okay, and that's what the Daishonin is basically saying. If you believe that, I've got some real estate I want to sell you. Okay, so the Daishonin is qualified. There was a major drought in China in the period of middle of page 600. There was a major drought in China in the period of the Qin dynasty, but the great teacher Tentai recited the Lotus Sutra. Let me go one paragraph above on page 600. First column. This was one of the greatest frauds ever known in our nation. In other words, the stuff that I just read about. Okay, and in addition, there were the matters of the epidemic that broke out in the spring of the 9th year of Conan era, and of the 3-pronged diamond pounder, which were also frauds of a most peculiar kind. These things had best be shared in person, because he says again, I don't want to start slandering Kobo in writing, because you'd have to go check it out before you'd really know whether I'm right or wrong. There was a major drought in China, middle of page 600, first column. There was a major drought in China in the period of the Qin dynasty, but the great teacher Tentai recited the Lotus Sutra, and in no time at all, rain began to fall. The ruler and his minister bowed their heads, and the common people pressed their palms together in reverence. Moreover, the rain was not torrential, nor was it accompanied by wind. It was a soft shower. The Qin ruler sat entranced and in the presence of the great teacher and forgot all about returning to his palace. At that time, he bowed 3 times in acknowledgement to the great teacher, Tentai. A great drought occurred in Japan in the spring of the 9th year of the Conan era. Emperor Seiga offered Fuyu Tsuga to send the lowest ranking official Matsuna to the great teacher Dengyo to ask him to offer prayers for rain. The great teacher Dengyo prayed for rain, reciting the Lotus, Golden Light, and Benevolent King's sutras. And on the 3rd day, thin clouds appeared and a gentle rain began to fall. The emperor was so overjoyed that he gave permission for the building of a Mahayana ordination platform, which we all know was Dengyo's big deal. It had never been done. He was the first one to accomplish something that had been prophesied would be accomplished someday throughout the teachings of Buddhism. A Mahayana ordination platform, the establishment of which had been the most difficult undertaking in Japan. Gomyo, the teacher of the great teacher Dengyo, was a sage and the foremost priest of Nara, the southern capital. He and 40 of his disciples together joined in reciting the Benevolent King's Sutra to pray for rain, and 5 days later, rain began to fall. It was certainly splendid that rain fell on the 5th day, but less impressive than if it had fallen on the 3rd day, as in the case of the great teacher Dengyo. Moreover, the rain was very violent, which made Gomyo's performance inferior. From these examples, you may judge how much more inferior were Kobo's efforts to produce rain. Thus, the Lotus Sutra is superior, while the true word is inferior, he's saying. And what's he predicating that on? He's not going after it doctrinally. He's just qualified it on a different basis. In judging the relative merit of Buddhist doctrines, I, Nichiren, believe that the best standards are those of reason and documentary proof. It's not reasonable to have the sun come out at night, right? Okay. And even more valuable than reason and documentary proof is the proof of actual fact. So he's saying it based on the absence of the proof of actual fact. Okay? Understand, that's what he's saying here. Moreover, the rain was very violent, which made Gomyo's performance inferior. From these examples, you may judge how much more inferior were Kobo's efforts to produce rain. Thus, the Lotus Sutra is superior because that's what produced the right kind of rain for Dengyo and for Tentai. Okay, while the true word school is inferior because all of their prayers for rains made precipitation occur, but it was a disaster. And yet, as though deliberately to bring the ruin of Japan, people these days rely exclusively on the true word, the Daishonin says. Thus, the Lotus Sutra is superior while the true word school is inferior, and yet, as though deliberately to bring about the ruin of Japan, people these days rely exclusively on the true word. Considering what had happened in the case of the retired emperor of Oki, we remember that guy, right? What happened to him? He relied on true word priest prayers to protect him from the shogunate, and he got his ass kicked. He got sent to the island of Oki. That's how he became the retired emperor of Oki, right? He says, considering what happened in the case of the retired emperor of Oki, I believed that if the true word practices were used to try to subdue the Mongols and the Azo barbarians, Japan would surely be brought to ruin. Therefore, I determined to disregard my own safety and speak out in warning. When I did so, my disciples tried to restrain me. But in view of the way things have turned out, they are probably pleased at my actions. I was able to perceive what not a single wise man in China or Japan had understood in more than 500 years. When Shanmu Wei, Qingkanchi, and Pukun prayed for rain, rain fell, but it was accompanied by violent winds. You should consider the reason for this, because it's coming from an incorrect prayer. These are cases of people making rainfall there are cases of people making rainfall even through the use of non-Buddhist teachings, even those of the Taoists, which are hardly worth discussion. And of course, with Buddhist teachings, even if those of the Hinayana are correctly applied, then how could the rain fail to fall? And how much more so if one uses a text such as the Mahavrachana Sutra, which, though inferior to the Flower Garland and Wisdom Sutras, is still somewhat superior to the Agama Sutras of the Hinayana. Thus, rain did indeed fall, but in fact it was accompanied by violent winds as an indication that the doctrines being applied were contaminated by grievous errors. And the fact that the great teacher Kobo was unable to make rain fall, although he prayed for 21 days, and that he misappropriated the rain that the emperor had caused to fall and called it his own, indicates that he was even more gravely in error than Shanmu Wei and the others. But the wildest falsehood of all is what the great teacher Kobo himself recorded when he wrote, in the spring of the 9th year of the Konin era, when I was praying for an end to the epidemic, the sun came out in the middle of the night. This is the kind of lie this man was capable of. This is the Daishonin speaking very, very frontally about somebody who is revered by a big number of people in the country, right? This is the kind of lie this man was capable of, okay? So the Daishonin has no problem calling out a liar for being a liar. He doesn't go about, I need to be polite and respectful to Kobo because he's got such a crew. No. This is the kind of lie this man was capable of. This matter is one of the most important secrets that is entrusted to my followers. They should quote this passage to drive their opponents to the wall. Setting aside for the moment the question of doctrinal superiority, I simply wish to stress that the matters I have written of above are of the utmost importance. Okay? And why is he saying that again? Are these matters that he's written of above? Is he pulling them out of his ass? Does this information not already exist? No, it already exists, but nobody's reading it, nobody's studying it, nobody is discerning what it's saying. That's what he just qualified. Okay? So he's saying it is, they should quote this passage, quote this thing about him, quote Kobo in his writing when he wrote that I made the sun come out in the middle of the night. And then look at the person and go, what are you smoking, man? All right? So they should quote this passage, should drive their opponents to the wall to say, what kind of a dumbass are you? You believe that he could actually make the sun come out at night?
Right.
All right? Drive his opponents to the wall. Don't let them off the hook on this.
Right.
All right? Setting aside for the moment the question of doctrinal superiority, I'm not even going to get into that. I simply wish to stress that the matters I have written of above are of the utmost importance. They should not be discussed lightly or passed on to others. It is because you have shown yourself to be so sincere that I am calling them to your attention, because I trust you to believe me rather than to utilize what I'm saying to go report to somebody else and suddenly create a bunch of consternation by misquotation or distortion of what I was trying to convey that might have been over your head from the standpoint of understanding. Because it is because you have shown yourself to be so sincere that I am calling them out to your attention. And what of these admonitions of mine? And what of these admonitions of mine? Because people regard them with suspicion and refuse to heed them, disasters such as those we now face occur. He says, okay, and what about all this shit I'm saying? Because nobody's listening to me or doing anything. All this stuff that I said is going to happen is actually happening. I don't want it to happen. I'm not the reason it's happening. Your slander is why it's happening. That's what I tried to advise you of. And what of these admonitions of mine? Because people regard them with suspicion and refuse to heed them, disasters such as those we now face occur. If the Mongols should attack us with great force, I am sure that the teachings of the Lotus Sutra will spread far and wide in this present lifetime. At such a time, those persons who have treated me harshly will have reason to regret. Now, why does he say that? If the Mongols should attack us with great force, I am sure that the teachings of the Lotus Sutra will spread far and wide in this present lifetime. Number one, because the prayers of all of the other schools didn't do anything to stop the Mongols, right? They weren't successful. But moreover, that would in actuality validate everything that Nichiren's been saying all this time that no one has listened to or heeded. And his sense then is that if I could finally get somebody to cut me some slack and support what I'm saying, we could maybe turn this all around and save the nation. At such time, those persons who have treated me harshly will have reason to regret, because I will have validated that I was right and you were wrong. Okay, the non-Buddhist teachings of India date from about 800 years before the time of the Buddha. The non-Buddhist teachings of India date from about 800 years before the time of the Buddha. That's Jain, yogi stuff, all that kind of, okay? There was all kinds of things outside of Buddhism. I mean, this Shakyamuni is where Buddhism starts, right? So before Shakyamuni was born, you can't have Buddhism, right? So these non-Buddhist teachings, or what Shakyamuni was going up against as he was trying to propagate his insight. Okay, the non-Buddhist teachings of India date from about 800 years before the time of the Buddha. At first, they centered around the two deities and the three aesthetics, but eventually they split into 95 schools. Among the non-Buddhist leaders were many wise men and persons endowed with supernatural powers, but none of them was able to free himself from the sufferings of birth and death. Moreover, the people who gave allegiance to their teachings, whether faithful or not, all ended up falling into the three evil paths. When the Buddha appeared in the world, these 95 groups of non-Buddhists, we are all understanding, right? These 95 groups of non-Buddhists conspired with the rulers, ministers, and common people of the 16 major states of India, some of them reviling the Buddha, others attacking him or slaying his disciples and lay supporters in incalculable numbers. But the Buddha did not slacken his resolve, for, as he said, were he to cease preaching the law because of intimidation from others, then all living beings alike would surely fall into hell. He was deeply moved by pity and had no thought of desisting. These non-Buddhist teachings came about through a mistaken reading of the various sutras of the Buddhas who preceded Shakyamuni. These non-Buddhist teachings came about through a mistaken reading of the various sutras of the Buddhas who preceded Shakyamuni. The situation today is much the same. Though many different Buddhist doctrines are being taught in Japan, originally they all derive from the 8 schools, the 9 schools, or the 10 schools. Among the 10 schools, I will set aside for the moment the flower garland and others, because Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho were deluded as to the relative merits of the true word in Tendai schools. The people of Japan have in this life been attacked by a foreign country, and in their next life, they will fall into the evil paths. And the downfall of China, as well as the fact that its people were destined to fall into the 3 evil paths, also came about through the errors of Shanwu Wei, Qingkangqi, and Pukun. Moreover, since the time of Jikaku and Chisho, which are the second and third, or the third and fourth priests of Mount Hei, Dengyo's temple, that turned it into a true word temple, okay? Moreover, since the time of Jikaku and Chisho, the priests of the Tendai school have been constrained by the false wisdom of these men and developed their school into something quite unlike what it once was when Dengyo founded it. Is this really true? Some of my disciples may be asking. Does Nichiren really have an understanding superior to that of Jikaku and Chisho? Because, I mean, those are famous dudes, right? But I am only going by what the Buddha predicted in the sutras. Okay? So, what does this reveal to us? What does this paragraph reveal to us? I'll read it again. Is this really true? And parenthetically, as though he's quoting someone saying it, some of my disciples may be asking, does Nichiren really have an understanding superior to that of Jikaku and Chisho, in quotations? But I am only going by what the Buddha predicted in the sutras. So what is the purpose of that, of him qualifying that? Is this true? It means that even though he had his own teaching, his own disciples, there were things that when he said them, that were divined from his wisdom and his enlightenment, that didn't have an obvious predication in existing. His own people would be going, oh yeah? Really? Okay. So he's saying, does Nichiren really have an understanding that supersedes these later teachers, Jikaku and Chisho? Okay, because these guys were around when Dengyo was alive. Okay, so they were direct disciples of Dengyo, and yet they changed their story. And so the whole thing is like, shouldn't they know enough to not do something like that? But the Daishonin is then qualifying that. I'm not making anything up that I'm saying. I'm merely reading what the sutras have said, and I'm going by what the sutras predict and what Shakyamuni said. I don't give a shit about Chisho and Shikaku from Mount Hei. They're not the authority. The sutras from Shakyamuni are the authority. Okay, and he says, all I'm doing is going by that correct authority and emphasizing that it's already stating that this shit's going to happen if you do this. Okay? So the Nirvana Sutra states that in the latter day of the law, those people who slander the Buddha's teachings and fall into the hell of incessant suffering as a result will be more numerous than the dust particles that comprise the land, while those who uphold the correct teaching will be fewer than the specks of dirt one can pile on a fingernail. And the Lotus Sutra says that even though there might be someone capable of lifting up Mount Sumeru and hurling it away, it will be hard indeed to find anyone who can preach the Lotus Sutra just as it teaches in the latter day of the law of Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, what did that just say? The Nirvana Sutra states that in the latter day of the law, which is when? Now. And for how long? Forever. Okay. So in this time period we're living in right now, the Nirvana Sutra says that the people who slander the Buddha's teachings and fall into the hell of incessant suffering for having done so will be more numerous than the dust particles that comprise the land, while those who uphold the correct teaching will be fewer than the specks of dirt one can pile on a fingernail. That's to express how difficult the achievement of clarity, wise, because again, when you try to teach other people the truth, it would be one thing if they had no karma about not being able to perceive the correct truth based on their own actions. You know, you don't know that when you talk to them. You haven't seen their past. You don't see what slander they're carrying around like a ball and chain on their leg. You have to observe them for a while before you could do that, all right? So he's saying, it will be hard to indeed to find one who can preach the Lotus Sutra just as it teaches in the latter day of the law of Shakyamuni Buddha. And he puts that there, why? To qualify, there's only one of me and there's a reason there's only one of me. What I am is so hard, there's only one of me, okay? That can teach the sutras correctly from Shakyamuni Buddha in the latter day, all right? The Great Collection, the Sutra's Great Collection, Golden Light, Benevolent King's Protection, Parinirvana, and Sovereign King's record that when the latter day of the law begins, if a person who practices the correct teaching should appear, then those who uphold false teachings will appeal to the ruler and his ministers. The ruler and his ministers, believing their words, because they're the current authority, will revile that single person who upholds the correct teaching or attack him, send him into exile, or even put him to death. At that time, the king Brahma, Shakra, and all the other innumerable gods, as well as the heavenly and earthly deities, will take possession of the wise rulers of neighboring countries and cause them to overthrow the nation where these things take place. Doesn't the situation we face today resemble that described in these sutras? I mean, don't forget, Shakyamuni was attacked. The Arashima was branded in the face. Aradeva had his head cut off. Tiantai didn't go to a certain, he was invited to a big debate with all that. He said, no, you guys are just trying to get me there to kill me. I mean, there are none of these great teachers that did not face life-threatening situations for being great teachers. Okay? He says, who upholds attack. At that time, the great king Brahma, Shakra, and the other innumerable gods, as well as the heavenly and earthly deities, will take possession of the wise rulers of neighboring countries and cause them to overthrow the nation where these things take place. So in other words, he's saying, these countries and these individuals that are leading these people astray, well, there will be karmic retribution for them. They'll be overthrown. They won't stay as authorities. They won't continue to have power over the people. He says, doesn't the situation we face today resemble that described in the sutras? I wonder what good causes formed in your past lives lives have enabled all of you to visit me, Nichiren. Now, wow. Can you imagine? Doesn't that sound a little bodacious? But what is he qualifying to them when he says it? There's only one of me. There's only one of me. And I am correct. And everybody else isn't. And it's up to you to perceive the truth of that, or you're screwed. Okay? I wonder what good causes formed in your past have enabled all of you to visit me. You must be some badass good people to know me and to be able to have me directly speak to you about the truth and the correct teaching. To visit me, Nichiren. But whatever you might discover in examining your past, I am sure that this time you will be able to break free from the sufferings of birth and death. So he says, I know you must have made a bunch of good causes, but you probably weren't able to attain Buddhahood in your present form. But this time, you've got everything you need to be able to do that. I am sure this time you will be able to break free from the sufferings of birth and death. That's attaining Buddhahood in your present form because it's perpetual infinitely. Tripitaka was unable to memorize even a teaching of 14 characters, even in the space of 3 years, and yet he attained Buddhahood. Devadatta, on the other hand, had committed to memory 60,000 teachings, but fell into the hell of incessant suffering. These examples exactly represent the situation in the world in this present latter age. Never suppose that they pertain only to other people and not to yourselves. I'll say that again. These examples exactly represent the situation in the world in this present latter age, which is now. It's still now, okay? Never suppose that they pertain only to other people, the guys in the ghost show, the guys from the past, the sages and the whatsoever. You're the Buddha, all right? Never suppose that they pertain only to other people and not to yourselves. There are many other things that I would like to say, but I will stop here. I do not know how to thank you for all you have done in these troubled times. So I have here outlined for you some important points of our doctrine, my crew. Thank you for the cowpeas and the green soybeans. The 26th day of the 6th month, reply to Nishiyama. Okay, I nailed it. I got just enough time to talk to Mr. Lee. And did anybody look that up for me? So that I could read specifically what he's asking.
I'll stop on YouTube then.
It's fine. You can. Well, no, you can stop YouTube. Go ahead and stop YouTube. This is for Mr. Lee as a Facebook group. Okay.